It's very emotional. We could have lost everybody.
Firefighter was injured battling a barn fire in Cecil County. According to the state fire marshal, the blaze broke out just before 12:30 yesterday afternoon on Anchor Hope Lane in Port Deposit. One firefighter was taken to a local hospital, treated and released. No one else was hurt. It took crews about 90 minutes to get the fire under control, and the cause is still under investigation.
Engine 7, Engine 7-3, Rescue 7-2, Tanker 7-2, Ambulance 791, respond. 167 Anchor Hope Lane at Port Deposit, the Anchor and Hope Farm for a reported barn on fire.
On the morning of the fire, Lewis and I were off the farm. It was the middle of the day around lunchtime, and we were both out doing other things, and Heather was there and she was having her lunch break, but for a stroke of luck, she decided not to go out for lunch that day.
So I don't know what stopped me from going to lunch, but I sat in my car and was very, very close to pulling out of the driveway, and then I decided I was not going to go get lunch. So I was just keeping an eye on things. I noticed the mares and foals that were next to me were kind of running around, not acting their normal selves, so I got out of the car to check on them, see kind of what was going on, and that was when I noticed something wasn't right inside the barn. I could hear our stallion Imagining hollering in his stall in a way that was not his normal vocal, just like something was wrong. And the minute I looked at the barn, I could kind of see smoke, and when I stepped into the barn, that's when I could hear the fire crackling.
The fire was terrifying. I just, you've never seen anything like it. I wasn't here when it started. I was about 20 minutes away, and Heather called me, and for 15 seconds into our conversation, I could tell that Heather was very upset, but I had not gauged how serious it was yet.
I just immediately jumped into action and started letting all of the horses that were in the barn out of their stalls, and just ran around, pulled the pins, opened the stall doors, yelled, screamed, anything to get them out of the barn, threw my hands in the air, anything to kind of scare them away from me and the situation. So they all did get out, 18 of them in total. It was our 2 stallions, Bourbon Courage and Imagining, and 3 mares with foals by their side, and 10 sales yearlings.
So the reason that the boys were not down here when we had the fire, it's under construction, so we don't have electricity down here. We're adding a couple stalls, stuff like that. So in the heat, it's really hot. The sun beats on them, and you can see their stalls are facing out. There's not much wind flow and stuff like that. So we had them up in the top barn for their fans and the airflow and everything like that. So unfortunately, had this barn been finished, they wouldn't have even been a part of the fire. But because it wasn't, we had them up top, and that's why they were in the fire. But this barn, afterwards, we kind of strung up some electricity to get them fans and stuff, and it's a really nice barn. It'll be really cool when it's finished. We're gonna have a little show ring for our stallion show and stuff. So, but here they are, the guys.
It was very unusual for me to not leave the farm for lunch. Usually, sometimes would bring food with me, but I would usually leave the farm to at least get a coffee or anything, a bag of chips or anything. It's very rare that before the fire that I would stay during my lunch break. I don't know what made me not leave. As soon as I sat down, it was kind of like we had hot days. It was muggy. The humidity was killing me. And it was sort of like when I sat down in my car, I was just like, I'm really tired. I'm just gonna eat what I have and take a nap, and then cut out the time that it would take me to go to the store, get my stuff. That's 20 minutes of nap that I could have. So I kind of figured that that was really what I was thinking about doing, was taking a nap, which did not happen either. So
And then I bet you weren't tired anymore.
I was not tired. I couldn't sleep that night, and surprisingly for me to, do what I did and kind of jump into action, I was not tired at all. I don't run. I'm not a runner. I've never been a runner, and I ran so much that day, back and forth, catching horses and everything, looking for horses. I feel like I didn't stop running, and adrenaline is a real thing because I've never experienced. There were times where I felt like I couldn't breathe, but I just couldn't stop. I had to keep going until we found everybody. And I think after we finally found Imagining and had the vet on her way, I kind of was like, took a minute, and I went into Lewis and Grace's house and kind of just broke down and was...
She told me what was going on, and I was, like I said, about 20 minutes away, and I was facing west away from the farm, and I did a U-turn to come back east to come home and help, and I could see a plume of smoke in the air. And the whole way home, I don't know if it's the way the land lays or whatever, or the smoke high in the air, it kind of gave you a feeling that it wasn't quite where it was supposed to be. So I just had this glimmer of hope the whole drive home that wasn't us, that our fire that was another fire, and ours was smaller. And the closer and closer I got to the house, the more I realized that it was our barn that burned down.
It's very emotional. We could have lost everybody. And I know we didn't. There's so much to be thankful for, but I see Imagining every day, and he has his scars from the burns, and he's so great about it. He's so tough. He never complained. He was so easy to take care of and treat, and he's amazing. But we were so close to losing him, and every time I see him, I'm reminded of that every day. And whenever I think about that day, I still get very emotional. I can hear him screaming, and it's haunting, the noise from him. But he's here, he's alive, and I just thank God every day that whatever kept me from going to lunch. My favorite part about Imagining to look at him is that belly spot on his belly. If you look right behind his shoulder there, he's got a little white spot. And I always poke him in it, and he doesn't necessarily like it, but I call it his belly spot, and I was just boop right in the belly. I don't know what it is. It's just adorable. It just makes him cute.
When I arrived first, there was a bit of traffic coming home, so I sort of got off on some back roads that are some pretty extremely windy roads that run along the river, and I did 80 miles per hour down those roads, went through town and came up the way that we wouldn't normally come up, and I kind of didn't even slow down when I hit the driveway, and there were firemen at the end of the driveway trying to stop me, and I just went right on by them. And drove up as close as I could get to everything that was going on. But by that time, there were fire engines everywhere and the driveway was sort of cut off. And I immediately got out and started looking for Heather, who I knew was looking for the horses. And by that time, Heather had gotten pretty much everybody. There were some mares and foals that were loose, but they were kind of safe. They were just grazing with another group of mares and foals on the other side of the fence. The main concern were the stallions, or Imagining at that point. Imagining was missing. So Heather kind of directed everybody, where she had checked, where she had not checked, and where she saw them last. And I started heading off in the direction that Heather pointed, where she thought she had seen Imagining last. So I found Imagining hiding in the woods, and there's not a whole lot of people that have ever walked up on a horse that was extremely, injured to a point where, that's the end of the story. They're not going to make it. And if you have, they have this almost this way about them that they know it's over and they've given up, and it's almost like they accepted it. And when I was walking towards Imagining, because he's not a mean horse, but he is a big, strong, rammy horse. He doesn't really mean to be aggressive, but he just sort of beats you up with his presence. And this day, he just looked like he quit. So when I found him, I was almost certain that I was going to go over him and I was going to find a catastrophically broken limb or something along those lines. And I didn't have a shank on me, and I just took him by the halter and kind of gently moved him forward a couple steps, and he walked basically sound. And I had my phone on me, so I called Heather. I said, I found him. I said, I need a shank. So while Heather was bringing me a shank, I was going over him. And I found cuts and scrapes and a large hematoma on one side of his rib cage. But by all appearances, superficial, nothing major. So we get the shank on him, and then her and I kind of go over him together. And then we start making a way back to get him into a stall and take care of him. And at this stage, Heather knew that he had been in the flames, but there were no visible blisters on his back. So we get him into the stall, and our first thing to do is cool him down and get him water.
The burning and stuff wasn't apparent yet. So we brought him to the stall, and when I went down to really check him over, and I told Lewis, I think we need to have him checked. So Lewis called our vet, Cassie, and had her out right away.
The fire had taken out the well house, so we had no water. We had no running water. So that was the first thing that we had to address, was getting this stallion water and getting him cooled off. And while we were looking for water, the bumps on his back and his rib cage started to raise. And I left him, and they're, if they were there, they weren't pronounced enough to, make me really concerned. And the next time I came back to a stall, they were raised. His whole back down his rib cage was raised. And so that's the point where we knew that he had been pretty substantially burned. And the vet, we had already called the vet, and the vet was on the way, but it was basically, we were taking him to the hospital. So then I had to start up the van that had been melted in the fire. All the lights had been melted and the windows had been melted. And, the fire was 6 feet away from the van, and there's some firemen around, and I was like, is it okay if I start this up? And everybody's like, I guess so. And so I started it up, and we drove the van down to the stallion barn. And he ran right on the van, but then the problem was getting the van out because the driveway was blocked off with all the fire trucks. And I drove the van across the pond dike and sort of around and just sort of made a hole and got around to the driveway past the fire trucks and was able to get out on the road, and then we sped up to New Bolton.
If I would have turned my car away and drove out of the driveway, I wouldn't have noticed that the mares and foals were being silly and not being themselves, and they'd all be gone. There would be no saving them. I did it for these guys, I would do it again. I guess you can probably understand why I'd run into a burning building for these guys, because they can't do it themselves, but they're awesome. They're just standing here is it's a surreal feeling. It's just unbelievable to think that everything that had happened. And it's just, it's kind of a reminder that the old barn was a gorgeous barn. So, it's just kind of like, I know this barn will be beautiful and it's going to be cool because it's new and fancy and everything, but it's kind of takes away from the excitement when you think about why we have to do a new barn. But it's definitely like a surreal feeling, and it can be kind of bittersweet, I guess. I don't know how I saved imagining. I was really worried that he wouldn't make it, and he did, and he's fine. If you look at him, he's always has his ears up. He's so happy, and I remember all that day, and I'll feel the anxiety of that day, and I just hope that he never does, and that he's just, himself. He never acts like he's afraid or hurts or anything like that, and I hope that that's real and it's not something that we're missing, that, because it's really scary, and they're smarter than we think that they are, and they know a lot. He has changed dramatically when it comes to me. Like, he knows. He's so much easier on me. He's nicer to me. He doesn't bash me around, and he's not aggressive in any means, but with Lewis, you'll see him kind of throw his head, and he's a big horse, and Lewis will go from here to there, and he's like, oh, imagining. He's just a tough guy, and I notice with me, he's not like that. He comes up to the fence and puts his head over, and he lets me kiss his nose, and he's a horse who I don't think I ever could have done that to him before the fire. He's never been a cuddler or want to be touched or pet or loved on. He has a job, he knows his job, and he does his job. But these days, I think he's enjoying life a little more as a spoiled pet-like horse. So I'm just glad that we have that opportunity and we can spoil him now, because he deserves it.